Oscar with Mildred. How do you pronounce Mildred's last name?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And by the way, sorry, we never won. We just we was nominated.
Oh, that was a nomination. Okay. Yeah, I have to clean my brain.
Okay.
Thank you so much for clarifying, and we are honored to have you both with us. Looking at 12:05. Hopefully everybody is signed in. We've got a lot of really cool people in the group chat saying hello, how are you? Just so our audience members know that we have received 154 questions. So if you have new questions to put in the chat, I'm afraid we probably won't get to them. Frowny face on that. It's a lot to get through, and we're only slated to be on for an hour. We've got Vicky Sampson in the chat room. Vicky is an amazing editor. Some other colleagues of mine and friends from Valerie, Carrie, of course, Sarah, Yuting Yin. Hello, everyone. Rosanna. And from Brazil, we've got Singapore, Canada represented. This is awesome. So, 5 minutes in, I've created a little agenda so we have 5 minutes to sort of get in here and make sure everybody's acquainted and comfortable. And so, what are we talking about today? We're going to be talking about surround sound design. So, I just want to hear from Carrie real quick. Carrie, can you jump in my ear and tell me if we're ready to go?
We
Oh,
are
I see.
ready.
All right, I see Carrie's note to me too that we're on Facebook Live. So hello everybody all over the world. And let's get started. So we have a couple of categories to go over tonight when talking about surround sound, everything from acoustics, Dolby Atmos, career development. We have a lot of people who want to know how to get started here. And of course, we want to talk about design, like how are we actually working in this format where we have a center speaker and two speakers behind you, maybe speakers above you. What does that mean for even experienced sound designers? Find some interesting challenges working with that. We're going to talk about workflow from ingest to deliverables. And without further ado, let's have that first question. So I had about several questions, but I narrowed it down to about 12 of people who wanted to know about how to get started and how to get a career as a sound designer. So let's just take the first maybe 10 minutes to talk about your career progress, starting from how you got interested in sound, if you can. I know it's probably hard to encapsulate 30 years or 20 years into 5 minutes. But who'd like to go first, Paula or Ai-Ling?
Doesn't matter. I'll go. So I have no formal film or sound training. I went to a very radical art school, and I grew up in Nova Scotia, Canada. So on the East Coast, I went to a radical art school in Halifax. And but during that time, as a summer job, I became an apprentice for a film and picture editor at the National Film Board, a man named Les Hallman. And part of my job for a number of years was to sit with him, watch him cut on a moviola. He would give me the tracks. I would cut them into the 16 millimeter tracks and make cue sheets. I have to say my cue sheet game was strong and very artistic looking. So it was fun. But it was during that time that I watched him so carefully layer sounds and make stuff sound real, and it became addictive for me. And I went on to, as an artist doing my own work. I went to Toronto for a period of time. I ran a place, co-ran a place called Cross Street Video. We brought in a lot of technology. Our bent was to make all the tools of the high-end commercial facilities available to artists at a nominal fee. So that's what we did. And I crewed for people. I became picture editor, sound editor people, but I also started doing my own work. And I developed a real interest in the sonic elements of my work. And one day I got kind of sick of kind of playing the artist game and going for grants and staying alive that way, and decided to put my big girl pants on and go get a real job, and happened to walk into Sound Dogs Toronto, and they had just lost their effects guy. Greg King had moved to LA, and they were looking for somebody. And for some God unknown reason, they took a chance on me. And I knew nothing. I had no training, but I wanted it. I loved it. And I remember, you know, that first year, just getting thrown right into the fire, learning everything I could. And right down to, you know, I remember I got presented, I was working on a very well-known Canadian TV drama at the time called Due South. And I had to cut a car chase, and I had zero clue. So I literally slept on my editing room for a week, get up in the middle of the night in my little Ford Festiva, do moves that I sort of saw on screen to try and hear what it sounded like, and go back to my room and look for the sounds. And did that every night until I came up with something that worked. And it's, you know, I didn't have really mentors coming up. I think as women, we all know, I've said this a number of times to women during the course of my talk, that that we, you know, while we can get frustrated with our male counterparts, how easy it is for them, men support one another. They generally mentor one another. But if you're a woman moving up, and I wanted very much to do sound design. That was my thing. I wanted to work with sound effects. Really was very few opportunities for that. So, you know, you had to kind of make your own parade. And I worked in Canada for a little while, but we didn't get a lot of really high-end stuff. It was a lot of B-movie stuff or stuff that wasn't going well that American companies would send to Canada to save money. And I decided to jump right into the middle of it and come down to LA. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. Many, many years not working or working on real crappy stuff, but always trying to up my game, because that's the thing. It's like, especially when you're starting out, you know, you'll work on garbage. I mean, especially if you're a sound designer, you know, horror is a place that you'll cut your chops. I don't like horror movies. I can't stand them, but I have done more horror than I can shake a stick at, because it's where you develop your ideas for creatures, for details, for expressing sonically certain kinds of ideas that are meant to affect the viewer directly. Other kinds of ideas are subtler. Drama, you know, can be, you know, those are also expressing sonic emotions, but that's much subtler. But horror is just like right in there, down and dirty. And that's, you got to just do that. And even today, I mean, look, during COVID, there's not a lot of work around. But I'm looking for stuff because I'll up my game. It's like, oh, what am I weak in? You know what? I'm going to take this project, and maybe I'm not going to get paid much, and maybe it's not the project of my dreams. But you got to find something to make that is for you. So especially if you're working for free, which God knows as women, we get asked to do that a lot. And I've done a lot of pro bono work over the years for emerging filmmakers. It's just something that I have done. But even in that, I try to find something that I will get out of it. You know, either, oh, I'm going to try a new technique, or I'm going to try this piece of software I've never tried before and apply it to this thing and see how that works. And the person I'm working with will get what they need, and I get something out. So I'm always expanding my kit, you know.
That's amazing.
Always expanding and that's what you have to do. I mean, because here's the thing, ladies, you know, we're in this really weird time right now. And I think, I mean, now, not just COVID, but, you know, we're talking about the complete changing of the structure of our society that has been long overdue. And this is a time to dream and create. And it's a time to step out when the time is right, to step out in your glory and grab opportunity. But in order for you to do that, you've got to start preparing now. While we're in lockdown and you can't do much, get online. I'm taking courses right now. I'm taking a course in kind of electronic music composition using Ableton and EDM. You know, it's like nothing to do with what I normally do, but completely out of my comfort zone. And I'm learning all the time, and it keeps me like from being bored, depressed. And most importantly, if you want to emerge come out, you know, hitting the ground running when things start being lifted, because the film industry is in stall and will be for quite some time. You know, now's the time to get your chops up, you know, start learning some skills, you know, go online, grab a movie, rip the sound out, recreate it, just learn any way, so that when everything opens and, you know, they're looking for people to crew up, you're ready. You're not looking, because here's the thing, I think, it's a strategic thing. When we do open up, people are going to be desperate to get content out. There's not going to be a lot of time for training people. So the people who got their skills going and know what they're doing are going to be able to enter the workforce and pick up jobs, and they'll be given things that you might, 6 months ago, you might not have gotten the opportunity, but now, because they're going to need people and because everybody's minds are open and hearts are open, there's opportunities. So get ready and learn. I come up, Ai-Ling and I both came up at a time, not to date Ai-Ling, I'll date myself, at a time when we didn't have the internet and we couldn't go on and we couldn't take infinite classes and we couldn't do all this. We can do all that now, and it's amazing. So
Thank you. Yeah, Paula, you did an amazing job. I had lots and lots of questions about people asking, while we're on lockdown, while all this is happening, how do I keep fresh? How do I learn? And the tips that you have just given are incredible. Thank you for all those people who've submitted questions like that. We're going to take another couple seconds to talk about career development, this time with Ai-Ling. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So basically, with me, well, I'm from Singapore, so I grew up, my dad just loved watching Hollywood movies, which is kind of like his home theater sound system. And so grew up watching a lot of say Terminator 2 and the Jurassic Park many times over and over again. And I did, from watching them, and I really enjoyed movies. I kind of thought, hey, I really want to be a part of filmmaking. It just slowly dawned on me that, with sound, it's such a powerful storytelling tool that it can affect how you feel and put you right in the scene without, you seeing it. It's just subconsciously affecting you. At that time, I had wanted to go apply for a film school thing in Singapore at that time, but it was I think they only had one course in the country back then. So, of course, instead of going there, I went to this audio engineering school. It taught more about the basics of the science and acoustics and music related part of sound. And while I was studying at night, during the day I was working to help pay for the school fees, and then I got in as an intern at in Singapore at a audio post house for radio, TV commercials, and music recording and mixing. And they hired me, and I worked there for a little over a year. Basically, it kind of it's a great introduction for me because in commercial work, it's just you alone with a bunch of backfill clients, and you have to liaise and record the voiceover and edit all the music, edit all the sounds, and mix them and stuff. And so kind of it's a good opportunity to be thrown into all kinds of areas of sound, to know how things work and to work with clients. And but I knew that I really wanted to work in film, and at the time there weren't that many film work in Singapore, so decided to try my luck out in Los Angeles, and wrote a bunch of letters. I think similarly, to what Paula said. I mean, at that time there was internet and emails, but emails at the time just didn't feel as formal. So I wrote letters and mailed out the letters, and to various sound department heads at different studios, or owners of different sound studios here. Just from, I know it kind of sounds stalkerish, but from watching movies that I sound for, I look at the credits and see who are the designers or supervisors and where they worked at, and try to find out where those places are and try to email. Try to mail the letters out to those people at those addresses. And I was surprised to hear that, to hear back from, like, I'd say maybe 60-70% of the letters that's mailed out, basically asking about, like, to introduce myself, and that I have worked a little bit in Singapore, and I'm curious about how film sound works, how their workflow is like in LA, and if I could visit them, and if I can sit in and just to learn a little bit. And I was just surprised that I got some replies, and so decided to just try to, like, move out here give myself a year to see how things go. And so moved here, besides all the learning environment situations culturally, and not knowing how to drive in LA, but besides all of that, and driving around town to meet everyone was really nice and supportive, and they showed me around some the departments or their sound studios, and met with different people, and I made myself really clear that I'm really more interested in sound effects, sound design work, because once I got there and met people, I've learned from some people, letting me know that, because I don't know, it's kind of odd, but generally nothing is wrong about it, but generally guys assume that women like to do dialogue and ADR work, and at that time was not that common. I think there's more like young women who want to do effects and design now, but I think at that time, I guess you just have to make it clear, and they are all really important jobs in film sound. It's just, for me, I'm just interested in effects. So I made that known, and was able to sit in at places, but they are all like union shops. So I just lucked out and found work at this non-union shop, kind of co-owned by this supervisor, mixer, designer guy. His name is Elmo Weber, and that's also
where we met,
Paul.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paula, and so they hired me, and so I started working there. They did a mixture of, like, indie, low budget horror or art house, like the vendor stuff, and then they also did some Adam Sandler related kind of movies. So also learned a lot there, and did mostly sound effects. I think I started there helping out on, like, assisting and, like, kind of cutting some music for this independent film called SLC Punk, and then right after that I started cutting effects and stuff for them, and just branched out after that, but always kept in contact with the people I've met, because a lot of, at least a lot of the work in Los Angeles is about, like, referrals and who you know, and
which I'm terrible at, by the way. I'm really bad at that.
Yeah.
It requires peopling. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, in a way you do it, but you want to make sure you don't get, like, be too pestering, and annoying. Just hopefully just call at the right time that they need the help, and that if they are willing to take a chance on you. And like Paul said, it's all about doing it and learning, and to know what sounds would work, what wouldn't, and or if you like, keep recording sounds and create your own library, because you never know, some random sound that you may need down the road, or watch lots of movies, or even if it's video games or whichever that you feel like, hey, if the scene works well, maybe try that kind of affects you in a certain way. Maybe try to, like, break it down if you can, to see, like, what is it that makes it work. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, I've met some editors, younger editors, like, say, you can, besides like helping do other friends or other students, like short films and whatnot, like Paula said, some people like would take some scenes from movies or clips from a video game and just rework it, and that itself is almost like a show reel, which is good. Sometimes, say if I'm a supervisor and we need to hire someone new, we may meet them and ask if they have like clips like that with their own work, and then they'll send it, or even like better yet, have a personal session, and then we can meet in person and see how you work, how you lay out, what kind of sounds that you put. So the more practice you do, the better.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I don't know. I know we have dozens of people in our Zoom chat who registered with Sound Girls, and I know we have several more watching on Facebook Live. But can you imagine, the opportunity to sit down with Ai-Ling or Paula and actually get that sort of one-on-one mentoring? It's incredible what these women, have to offer in terms of their expertise. And if you're just joining us, we spent the first half of our talk going over careers and career development. We just got an amazing amount, thank you, of tips. I know we're going really fast because we're short on time. Hopefully you were taking notes. If not, hopefully you will be able to watch this later on Facebook Live. But wonderful advice. For the second half of our talk today, I think we have some professionals in the group who have asked some pretty amazing questions having to do with surround and atmos. Of course, our talk has to do with surround sound. So maybe the way we start is sort of making that artistic leap from stereo to 5.1 and from 5.1 to atmos. What sort of freedom does that afford you, creatively, when you have sounds coming from behind and up? How do you design differently?
I guess I'll go first. So typically in the projects that I do, we'll try to work in the format that is the widest. So if you can, we'll work in like 7.1 or Atmos, because with 7.1 it's much easier to go into Atmos. And for me, the crux of it on the scene is to actually, if you have good effective sound that helps relay the emotions of the scene, that's the main thing about it. Then after that, then I will worry about the surround part of it. Is to maybe narrow down, what's the core key themes, the sounds that we need to play, and sometimes, I get it that not everyone has like Atmos monitoring in their office, so typically we would start cutting in 7.1, and then I'll do a pre-mix on there, and then as we go along, then I'll add in the object tracks. And for me, Atmos, the biggest benefit is the full range surround. So it's good for, say, music, and say if you have something heavier effects-wise, like maybe a jet by or an explosion that you can feel it around the room. You don't lose that low end. And also, but sometimes the ironic thing about Atmos, to use the ceiling, is that simpler is better. So say, because if you have too many sounds moving around, your ears just can't catch like what's really that discrete above you or something. So sometimes even the simplest thing, like say you know, earlier on when they first introduced Atmos, you know, they had some clips up front of the movie, and like I think Gary Reinstrom did one really good one. I guess just a simple like leaf like flutter around your head, and yeah, it's just like simple, like, or even like rain, when you're in a scene with rain and putting some rain drips or whatever in the ceiling. So say if I have a DZ scene, sound effect scene, and say like on First Man, they are like being tossed around in this capsule, and we have, I don't know, maybe sometimes at one moment we may have like say like 20 sounds going on at one time. For that, sometimes if my image is good enough, in that, I feel like I sense the image that is moving me, that I feel like I'm being like moved around in, say, the capsule in 7-1, I may not really put much into the overhead. I'll just rely on the full range surround. But sometimes, otherwise, sometimes I would just pick like one or two elements that's the main focus sounds out of the, say, 16 or 20 sounds, and pan it in the overhead. I think, yeah, and then so basically we'll finish a final mix in Atmos, and then after the final mix is done, then that's when we do our deliverables. Then we'll do the mix down the different formats, which would then also need readjustments on your mix. Yeah.
And do you do the down mixing, or do you hand that off?
We typically like to do that, especially going from Atmos to like 7151 and so on. Sometimes, like, because of the frequency response is different in the surrounds, depending on the movie that you're on. If it's like a fairly light sounding movie, it's not too bad. But if it's like heavy, like, explosions or effects or creature stuff, that's a lot in the surrounds. Sometimes when you fold it down, during the fold down process, you may want to adjust some of your object levels or the surround levels, just so that it's still in, it's like, it translates okay. Yeah.
Very good. There's a lot of questions on down mix. Let me see if I can pull one. Do you ever get phasing issues when you're doing that? When you're doing the down mix? And then, do you ever monitor through headphones when you go down to stereo, or?
At least for the work that I do, we seldom run into phasing issues when we do down mix. But of course, when we started off, like say if we are using MS recording and stuff, we make sure we decode it properly. Otherwise, no, so far I have not run into phasing issues. And then as far as monitoring in headphones, when we go into the stereo, so typically, I guess for the projects I do, if we do need like a stereo near field mix, I have not been checking it on headphones. We've just checked it, mixed it in near field stereo, like, just on the speakers.
Cool. Thank you. And Paula, do you want to jump in with your approach to?
Well, I'll go because I haven't really been mixing a lot, although now with the new way it is, I just don't like spending time in rooms with people. No, I don't. I like collaborating with people, but I think just my own trajectory coming up, I didn't like feeling like I was being judged while I'm trying to work, and that has been the main reason why my entire career I have had my own studios, because I could unwind, mess up, learn stuff, and not be judged for it, and it's okay to make mistakes and try, so it's the only way. So now with the changes, I have a full setup I can mix, but I just haven't done it. But now I actually might jump in doing more of that. But I do a lot of mixing in my design. And what I will say is that as I've worked with many mixers and lots of different formats and stuff over the years, and because of the kinds of stuff that I'm interested in doing, been asked to do, my design itself has gone through lots of interesting things. And if we talk just about creatures, for instance, one of the things, especially with stuff like Atmos or multi-channel formats, I've over the years also in an attempt to survive the battle between music and sound effects, I've developed a number of different ways of dealing with that, and one of them is to basically conceive of, like, if I'm doing a creature, to conceive of it in many layers. Right?
Mm.
So even the vocal might have high, mid, and low range. Then you've got the physicality. So, like, say, let's take the dragons, for instance. So they had wings, they had bodies, they had feet, and they're all moving around. Okay, so there's lots of opportunity there. I mean, I have a room that I have kind of a small, near field kind of Atmos setup, but mostly I work in 7/1 kind of feel. And I will, when I'm preparing for stage, I will rough in where everything is panned. So if for no other reason, when the mixer grabs it, they know what is supposed to go where, they have an idea, because sometimes you get a lot of sounds, it's hard to find where things are going. But also to design such that sonically the stuff could be expanded because of Atmos and subs and mid, you know what I mean? So you could make, so all the pieces have to work together, kind of interlocked, but each one of them plays and plays a function. And in the multi-channels, for instance, with an Atmos, you could take one of those elements and have it move overhead, for instance, depending on the scene, whatever, or it all stays down on the floor. But the other great thing about doing it that way and designing that way is that when you do come up against music, because it happens, and it happens in a lot of things, you get in, especially with creatures and horror or creatures and thrones or whatever, you often are up against some serious music. They're like, the music's hitting all the same marks you're trying to hit, or, the creature jumps out and the music jumps out, and it's like you're battling all the time. So if you've got it set up in layers, not only can the mixer move it around the room in pieces, almost pull the animal apart to make it bigger, whatever, but you can shove mid-range through the music if it's going high and low, or if the music's going low and you can shove something up higher so that the essence of what you're designing remains. Because as Ai-Ling and I and many of you all know, it's like if you pick the wrong sound and it goes up against music, you will often lose that battle. And if it's not layered up such that something can poke through, I mean, that's it, you're done, it's gone. So in order to keep your work alive, to think in in frequency layers, but also in useful pieces that can be moved cohesively around the room, can be pulled apart and moved around the room, but also if they're squished, because I do that all the time, I'll play everything together and down one speaker just to see how it's all fitting, should everything go there, but also how does it feel when I start to open it up? Does it make sense? Are the frequencies kind of playing off each other well, that it works? And I will say that I'm constantly changing the way I work, because I come up with new ideas about new tools, whatever, but also with the work style of the mixer I'm working with, the room they're in, the format that they're working in. So it's become really interesting. I think, the technologies that we have are at our fingertips. I mean, I started, this is really going to date me, I did the first feature that I ever did was actually pre-Pro Tools. And it was called Sound Tools, and there was Sound Designer 1. And I used those, cut the stuff, and put them on a 32-track 2-inch machine. It was in Banff, actually, that I did that. And so, from then to what we have at our disposal now for working, and the kind of blurry lines now between mixer and, it's in some ways I'm pre-dubbing my stuff roughly, setting up nicely. So because I want them to throw it up on the stage, listen to it, and then dig in, rip it apart, go for it. You know what I mean? But present your ideas, you've got to kind of get it in the ballpark as close as you can. Not all mixers will give you that moment to play it as you present it, so that's a little frustrating. But, you know, I just look for ways of just continuing to make the sound design live no matter what the music's doing. And, you know, it's battle wheel. I used to say it's like because in Thrones, as the seasons progressed, Ramin's music got more and more elaborate with choral and oh my God. And, you know, so, and I love his music, but I always said it was like the ultimate battle of ice and fire because it was like constantly I was putting, you know, crappy effects on his beautiful music, and then I'm having to deal with his music to get my crappy effects through. But it's an interesting thing. It's the dance we always play when we work in this format where we've got bold music, bold effects, all that.
Thank you. We have some questions coming up in the chat. I just wanted to remind everybody we've also got, you know, we had 157 questions that we had to whittle through. So apologies to anybody who doesn't feel like their questions are being answered. But actually, Paul and Ai-Ling have walked us through a lot of the answers. And what I'd like to do right now is sort of build on what Paula or unbuild, as the case may be, and talk a little bit about backgrounds. So, you know, sort of like the bed of what you're working with. We had a question come in from our audience about whether you use ambisonic material, multi-channel beds. How do you what are you using to capture your beds? How do you source your background material for surround specifically?
Well, it's funny with ambisonic microphones. I mean, they're all the rage right now, but honestly, you know, the problem is you capture everything. I mean, they're getting now that you can focus more. And I think that there's actually, as the technology evolves, the way those microphones are going to be used is not the way we're using them now. I mean, it's lovely to capture, you know, a third order or higher, you know, recording in out in nature or whatever to use as your background. But the chances of it you being used like that on the stage for film and TV mixing, it's almost non-existent.
And why is that? Can you go into a little bit more about where that usability or where that functionality breaks down with that kind of higher order
Well, it takes,
sound?
I mean, aside from it taking up a lot of tracks and sort of limiting the flexibility, I mean, the main thing is if you've got a recording and you've got, you know, beautiful grasses and you've got a lovely cricket over here and you've got a bird up here and all those things are all married into one recording. Very hard to pull them out. And that is probably the singular, like when you say Ai-Ling, it's probably the singularly most main reason why ambisonic recordings are not used that much. I mean, it's not to say you can't. And I have used some 5.0s, probably are the widest I think I've used for a basic bed of air or some basic, but you know, then it's all about, you know, as Ai-Ling was pointing out, it's all about the placement and where you place everything, but it's all in one recording. You can't do that, so you're just basically sending a recording. And it's not to a point, I mean, I know that you can focus recordings and stuff now in the technology, but that hasn't hit the stage such like that, and I think we're kind of expected to present this stuff to the mixers such that they can, because it's all about money and time. And, you know, so it's got to be an expedient way of working. So I might take a recording that I did and extract information or mix it down or whatever, because there's something in it that I really like that's you know, in a first order or third order recording or whatever. But mostly I'll be building, you know, go in and I'll create the winds and then I'll create the bugs and I'll create the birds or create the whatever it is. And you populate in bits and pieces so they can be brought in and out easily, that they can be moved around to create the space in the room. And so, yeah, I think right now the ambisonic recordings, unfortunately, they're fabulous, but they're not highly useful. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, it's a great, you know, it's a great idea. And for me, I seldom end up using a 5.0 or 7.0 recording on all the channels. If I do end up using one of those recordings, I'll make it into a stereo. It's all about, for me, it's all about clean interesting sound,
Yep.
simple.
Yep.
And so then you can then much more effectively and cleanly place it around in your mix. And for me, spotted backgrounds is really important than a blanket bed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because for a background to play in a scene, it needs to, sometimes I feel, kind of react and work around the dialogue.
Right.
Or say, sometimes, depending on the movie, and the filmmaker, if, like, say, the scene and they have two characters that were talking, and suddenly, like, maybe they start, like, talking, the conversation builds into, like, some kind of argument. And you can also use backgrounds, like, to just, like, gradually build in intensity, but you just keep it low under the mix. It's kind of like a subconscious underscoring.
Yeah.
So it's all about, like, interesting sounds, spotted sounds, for me, and like Paula said, if it's like a, ambisonic, 5/0 or 7/0 recording, sometimes it may have other sounds in there that's already married in there that I don't really need. I want it to be as clean as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I heard now, there's some interesting stuff that's happening with, some of these microphones that can do like second and third order recordings where the software is becoming sophisticated enough that you can focus. And I could see that being used more actually for dialogue than for, you know what I mean, to have the mic sitting in a room where if suddenly a character goes off mic, you might actually be able to pick them up that way. I mean, there's some interesting possibilities with that as it evolves, but in terms of use of background specifically, I would say probably not.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to check. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, my delicious Mac Pro just died, so I knew I was going to need my laptop backup. I'm sort of mystified as to why that happened. Thanks everybody for bearing with me. I know there were two Leslies up there for a second. Thanks for focusing a little bit on capturing sounds and backgrounds. We did have a couple of questions talking about what the relationship is with the engineer on the dub stage. So how much, verbatim, the question is, how much do you talk or interact with mixers on the dub stage? I assume that question's for Paula.
Oh, I mean, as much as they'll talk to me, not all of them do, but no, it's, I need that feedback. I need to know. I mean, I work really hard to try to present, especially if I'm working with someone that I've not worked with before. It's like you're trying to set it up and give them the tools so they can work really efficiently, that the work makes sense, that it's in the kind of ballpark, so that they can now take that and go to the next level with it. So it's really, it's about that. It's also, you don't always have the music, especially if you're working in TV, you often don't, although I will ask for it as often as I can get it in advance so I know what I'm going up against to make sure that what I'm giving, with creatures or something a little more straightforward like that, it's a little easier. But when you're getting into, like, I'm working on something right now where my design job is to create the PTSD for each of the characters, which I gotta say during the time of COVID has been harrowing to say the least. But in that case, the meshing and blending of score and sound design have to kind of, and it's been very challenging in some ways. We've got, as the show has, a fairly experimental composer on whose work I love. And, and it's interesting. I think what I've always found fascinating is that often if the spotting sessions or the material is evocative enough, you'll find that I will often find myself and the composer on the exact same wavelength, even though we've never spoken. And that's a really interesting thing because we're kind of vibing on the same stuff and finding, kind of coasting on the same emotional core of something, which is really cool because when that happens, then the stuff seems to magically work. It's tough, but again, like I say, I mean, over the years, I've refined my way of presenting and preparing, and I try to find out in advance what the template is the mixer's using, I, of course, have my own templates, but what I'll do is I'll work, because I cut always almost exclusively now at 96K. So I'm working off in another zone anyway. And then I kind of mix my stuff down and plug it into whatever template I'm given and try to do it that way. So it's not a lot of messing around when they get my stuff. They can kind of pop it into their piece and get on with it, you know?
And how does it look for you, Ai-Ling?
Well, it just happened to be, for me, I typically, over the last, I don't know, 6-7 years, I have been, the shows that I supervise and design on, I'm also the effects mixer. So,
that's great.
Yeah, I mean,
great.
For me, the benefit to it is just because as I'm designing and mixing and when I'm supervising, I'm also, sometimes I have to delegate some other things to other editors, and then I get them back. And as we go over and, like Paula, to like when we pre-mix, as we are cutting, the pre-mixing help us determine, what sounds may work, what sounds won't, and help simplify the process by the time we get to the mix stage. And then, for me, because being also, so, by that point, by the time I get to the final mix, theoretically, I would have gone over all the design ideas and trying different things, through the film with the filmmakers, with the director and the picture editor, and so we'll try to dial it in more during the final mix. But that's not to say that the work that I create, I have to always protect by the time I get the final mix. I don't think it works that way by the time I get into the mixer chair, because by that point, on the final mix, you would have brand new score from the composer, and cleaned up dialogue, ADR, and whatnot. And also sometimes when you put everything together in a big room, I don't know, some things may need to change.
Yeah. And
that's always a give and take, definitely, between dialogue, music, and effects. And the thing I've learned is not to be too personal and too protective of, say, the effects that I have been carrying all these months.
That's the part that I struggle with the most, actually, about mixing, and it's why I've not trusted myself, because I'll get obsessive about sound and work on something for 3 days. I don't trust that when I get to the mix stage, I'm not going to go, I'm going to hear that goddamn sound. Thank you very much. I spent 3 days on it. It's playing. And that's not, it's, you get kind of wound up. It's like that thing where you're creating stuff and then you want to hear it, but it's always about the story that the director or the creator is telling. It's their art, not your art. And it's the thing that, because we're artists too, right?
Yeah.
But it's not our art. And I always say, it's like when you get frustrated, I hear this from young sound designers. It's like, well, that director doesn't know anything about sound. I made this great sound and he didn't like that sound. He's an idiot, doesn't know anything about the sound. It's like, no, that you're creating something for their voice. You're literally giving voice to their ideas. And if your sound, you might create a better sound that's in their track. But here's the thing, if you run in, and this is a very important thing, actually. If you run into a thing where you've created something and the director said that, no, I don't like that. I like the thing that's in the temp better. Okay, there is a thing we all know about tempitis. But there's another thing to pay attention to, and that is, even though your sound might be beautiful, you might have spent 3 days on it, it might be the most exquisite sound ever created, if it does not have the central core of energy and emotion that shitty sound that's in the temp track has, because that's what they're reacting to. If a director says that to you, go to the sound in the track and figure out what is that sound doing that your sound is not doing, and you'll have your answer about. And if you can bring that to the beautiful sound that you just made, then maybe they'll like that. But if that energy or the emotion or the viscerality or whatever it is, the directors, and it's hard to figure it out because they often don't even know themselves. But if you can't find that in the sound, they're going to go back to the sound in the temp track. That is for sure. And so there's that too. I mean, yeah, it's all about articulating someone else's vision, essentially.
Yeah.
I just want
Yeah.
to point out that the illustrious Vicky Sampson is leaving some great comments in the group chat. If you guys don't know who Vicky Sampson is, you should get to know Vicky. Her mother was Rose Sampson, who was the first woman to win an Oscar for The River, and Vicky, in her own right, has mentored such illustrious engineers as Leslie Ann Jones. Kay Rose, thank you. Not Rose Sampson, Kay Rose. Thank you, Vicky. Wow. Somebody needs a nap. So that would be me. Before we wrap, I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I think my favorite question that we got asked in the big pile of questions in preparation for this event was, what was the favorite moment? What is your favorite moment that you designed for? And I'm just going to put a twist on that. If 10 years from now in our little COVID time capsule, somebody finds a show reel of yours, what do you want them to hear from your catalog that you've done, that moment? Ah. That's why I love the question, because you have to think about that one real hard.
That is an interesting thing. I think for me, there's lots of stuff that I'm proud of. But I think for me, it's sort of a more personal thing, because I think it would be, there's the opening scene in the plaza, which is episode 4, season 3 of Game of Thrones, when Drogon comes out of this little cage. And that whole scene, and that sequence for me defines a very particular moment in my life. A very dark time for me personally. And this show was the light that brought me out of it. It also was the moment around this time that I decided to focus solely on one thing, because up until that point, one thing I didn't say in my kind of career thing is that one of the things that I had to do in my career was I basically to develop myself as a sound designer, because I couldn't get hired to do that very easily. I started supervising. I hated it. I do it well, but I don't like it because it's very political often, and it's not really about sound, a lot of it. I like coordinating stuff, but I like the kind of sound design thing more. And I think I just used to do that all the time, because then I could hire myself as a sound designer. That's how I got hired. So, but then at that moment when I made this transition, I felt like I was like jack of all trades and master of none. And I wanted to just dedicate to just design and just see how far I could go with that. And, the answer for me is I could go just in that for lifetimes and never master it, never conquer it, and never stop learning just in that, let alone all the other things that we do. I mean, there's no need to be bored in this beautiful thing that we've chosen as our life's thing, because, mixing has its own thing. I mean, I am actually devoting myself to working and developing those chops right now, because I would like to enter in that and do more mixing. But there's things that I want to develop, and the beauty of hearing and using tools in a different way that I've not done. I mean, my thing is wild, crazy, go to the end of the universe, find the weird sounds, bring them all back. The crazier, the better, the weirder, the better, dig deep, do that. That's been my life. And then mixing to me is about finding the center of all of that, organizing it in this beautiful way that someone outside of the design of it can understand it, can enter it, can feel it. And it really is about it's about making choices about which sound you play, maybe none, maybe one or two, whatever, but it's about then taking all these ideas and molding them into this final piece. And that in itself, I could probably spend lifetimes just trying to learn that too, and I never would. And so for me, that scene just represents that understanding about that, and it changed everything about the way I approach sound. And I realized I can pivot at any point and find my joy in another section, but still be in this arena, which is really powerful for me.
That's amazing. Yeah, a lot of people are giving some good reactions to that. You guys have been really awesome to share your time with us. In our final minutes, not that anything bad's going to happen, but we do need to wrap up and respect everyone's time. I know we've got busy production scheduled, but I really want to give Ai-Ling the opportunity to answer the time capsule question. What's your favorite moment that you've designed for?
Yeah, it's in the film. It's called Wild. It's directed by Jean-Marc Valée. It's about this lady based on a true story, Cheryl Strait, that Reese Witherspoon plays, and she went on this hike along Pacific Crest Trail to clear up her life. It was in a bit of a disheveled, and she was trying to figure out her life. And there's a scene because Jean-Marc, he doesn't like to use score. He uses a lot of source music, and when he works, he is also the picture editor also, and he also thinks a lot about sound and music. That's music editor. So that's the scene when Cheryl Strait was hiking, and it got really hot, and she's thinking back about her, when she was taking drugs and leaving her husband, and her husband came to get her away from her other affair boyfriend and all that. And so it flashes back and forth between the hike. She's in a daze because it was really hot in the hike, and into her past. And so managed to I was able to take the song more. And a lot of it is, of course, Jean-Marc, who figured out who knows what he wanted, but we're able to weave the song in and out, and then just using simple nature background sounds like cicada that would ascend and descend in pitch, and getting verby, and hearing a few of her words in production, and then it morphs into it just feels like it morphs into the husband picking her up, and you hear the rhythmic clickety clack on the tires on the metal bridge, and that morphs into her heartbeat. It's just for me, it was a fun opportunity because with working with Jean-Marc, he's almost like a one-man band almost, that he would give a scene to me that I could work, and he gives me directions. And as I'm working, he would say, if you need me to adjust the picture a little bit just to match the rhythm of the sound, I would just let me know. So I would send stuff and back to him, and then get his feedback on. And it was fun in the sense that personally, I feel like, to me, the sound was very evocative, and it takes you in and out of her mind. And sometimes, what you see is not what you hear. You may see her flashback, but all you're hearing are maybe sounds that you hear on the trail. I don't know. I just thought it was a really fun working experience. It was very challenging because he wanted the sound to not be too in your face, but to still have that effect on you, because he's not using score. He's relying on the sounds in the film. So I don't know. I just enjoyed the sound work on that movie. Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, everybody, you have your lockdown movies that you can watch now. Wild and season 4, episode 3, was it, Paula?
Season
Game
3,
of Thrones?
episode 4.
The other way. Season 3, episode 4 of Game of Thrones. So you guys have your homework to do out there in Facebook and Zoom land. I want to go ahead and wrap this meeting because I know we do have to go. I want to give a big thanks to Ai-Ling Lee, to Paula Fairfield for being with us. Thank you so much for being there. And then I also want to thank Anna Sully, who's, I'm not sure what everybody out there can see, but Anna is the coordinator for Women Who Are Sound, based here in the UK. And a big round of applause for Carrie Kais, who's hosting us from Sound Girls. We're using their resources to bring this to you, and we're going to be doing another one in a couple of weeks. So I just thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Leslie, too.
Yeah, well, you're
an awesome
Thank
host.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel honored. Totally honored to be here with you guys. Follow us on Facebook, soundgirls.org. If you're in the UK, get in touch with Anna Sully to find out how to join the group Women Who Are Sound. And that'll conclude our event tonight. Thanks everyone for watching, and stay well, stay healthy, and stay peaceful.
Go get them, ladies. Get out there. Get out there. Go get them.
Good seeing you guys.
All right. Hey, Vicky.
Hi.
Right on. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey, how are you?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Awesome.
All right, Carrie, I'll leave it to you to wrap up.
What is that woman's sound? What is that Anne Sully's thing? What is it called?
Women Who Are Sound.
Yeah, hi there.